Monkey D. Luffy is the most wanted man in the world, according to Boa Hancock and no one else, because she wants that there Monkey D. Which I find odd, very odd. I mean, not the D aspect. But I find the situation weird because Luffy has achieved more than any singular character in, I'm gonna go ahead and say, all of fictional pirate history. The world government is only just now catching up with the sheer danger that Luffy represents. Very shortly, Luffy is going to become the most wanted man in the world. And we know exactly how much he's going to be worth. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam, and if I was a pirate, I reckon I'd be worth around 500 million berries. Because according to Toei Animation, I'm probably considered quite the notorious fair use scallywag. But more importantly, here is a rubber boy. He may look weird, act weird, and think weird on the rare occasions when he does think at all, but he represents the greatest threat to the fictional established world order that this planet has ever seen. And the weird thing is, we knew this right from the beginning. Not so much because One Piece is a narrative and Luffy is the main character, but even in world, Luffy has been such an obvious threat since birth, an even more obvious threat around 17 years after his birth, and 2 years after that, he is on the verge of toppling the world government. And at no stage did someone go, hey, should we do something about this? So fine. I'll do it myself. Along with the help of Swimming Bird, Atomic Bowser, and Yakov, each of whom did the amazing thing of pressing the subscribe button for the Grand Line Review, which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture being administered directly into your YouTube feed. And if you'd like to be our next subscriber of the day, then hit the button, and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. Alright, here's why Luffy should have been an obvious threat from the beginning. On his pirate CV, you'll notice a section labeled Pedigree, and the mere fact that Luffy even exists already starts to raise some red flags. First of all, he is a Monkey D, which isn't exactly an obscure name in this world. Luffy is the identifiable grandson of Monkey D. Garp, the greatest marine to have ever lived, and potentially still the most powerful marine to have ever lived, as well as someone whose donut enthusiasm is topped only by the very uncomfortable love of donuts demonstrated by Charlotte Katakuri. I think he likes donuts a bit too much, if you get the drift. However, prominent monkeys can be found elsewhere, such as Monkey D. Dragon, a man who happens to be the officially recognized most wanted man in the world, leader of the Revolutionary Army, and all-around mystery box. What is inside this box? Dunno, I didn't ask. Because he has a scary face, denoting much more of a dragon than a monkey. However, with those two names in mind, I am shocked that nobody questioned the name Monkey D sooner. Dragon and Garp are arguably two of the world's most famous names alongside Goldie Roger himself, the great hero of the world and the great villain of the world. And I get that lots of people are just plain ignorant of what actually happens in these various seas and islands and things, but the monkey name isn't really something you can miss. So when a Monkey D just popped up over there in East Blue, it should have sounded alarm bells. And instead of saddling Luffy with a 30 million berry chunk of change, they should have been sending out an admiral or at least a vice admiral to investigate this monkey problem. Because they've done similar things in the past based on nothing but whose mother hole someone came out of. The Great Hunt for Baby Ace is one of those situations, but also dumping a truckload of berries onto a young Nico Robin, both of which showed that the world government are not exactly afraid to overreact a little in order to maintain their power. But also, that's not where we stop, because it gets much worse than this. Also in the pedigree section is the fact that Luffy happens to be considered a brother of Port Ghasty Ace, you know, the son of the Pirate King, the man whose very existence sparked a global infanticide, that guy, and also a division commander of Whitebeard, who would have been the next Pirate King if he weren't so busy being a really good dad. You gotta respect the man's priorities, you know? Not all kings wear crowns. Or shirts. Whitebeard does not like wearing shirts. And granted, the world government did not know this before the Paramount War, but they certainly did afterwards, and yet Luffy was still considered something of a Met in terms of threat levels. In addition to this, we also have a secret pedigree, which is that Luffy was inspired and mentored by Shanks, a notorious alcoholic and Emperor of the Sea. And I say those two things in equal measure because that's what they are. Shanks has two modes, either he's stopping a global war or he's pissing in a bush because he's too intoxicated to find the bathroom. And fair enough, look, I'm sure we've all been there. Also in the secret pedigree section is another brother from a completely separate mother hole, being Sabo, the second in command of the Revolutionary Army led by Luffy's daddy. And again, outside of Garp, the world government have no reasonable way of knowing about Luffy's connection to Shanks or Sabo, but everything else is still very much cause for concern. Luffy has a public connection to the greatest marine, the greatest pirate, and the greatest one of not those, whatever dragon is. He's a great thing. So I don't know, if Robin can be bountified for being able to read a bunch bunch of rocks, and Ace can be hunted for being the spawn of someone who beat a bunch of rocks, then surely Luffy should raise similar red flags. And that's before he's even done anything. We haven't even talked about the things. My god, the things. Just like a garden hose on full blast, this is where things start to get out of hand. Because it's hard to keep control of the hose, it goes all and explaining the jokes always makes them funnier. At the tippy top of Luffy's achievements list is the defeat of 3 of the 7 warlords of the sea. And in fact, if Luffy had defeated 0.5 more warlords, then Luffy would have beaten exactly 1/2 of the 3 great powers of the world. Except there are actually 11 7 warlords, so Luffy would have actually needed to defeat 5.5 of them. He kind of makes up for that though through the fact that he directly recruited another warlord into his crew. He has a documented alliance with both Buggy and Boa Hancock, and even an official alliance with Trafalgar Law, which that's a big step. It was very much like back in the day where you'd make a relationship official by pointing it out on Facebook. But Law was a warlord at some point for reasons that were never quite satisfactorily explained. I mean, we know how he did it, but we don't exactly know why he did it. He just literally became a warlord and said, "BRB, world government. I'm off to a barren island to give my heart to a clown, which is somehow part of my convoluted plan to beat up a flamingo." He could have just skipped the whole warlord thing and literally nothing would have changed. But mathematically speaking, Luffy has either defeated or made public allies of 7 of the 11 7 warlords, which is something that no other prominent pirate has ever come close to. Luffy pretty much single-handedly crippled this entire system. A system that, again, was referred to as one of the 3 great powers that maintained balance of the world. And yeah, that's pretty wow, but now, more things. In terms of one of the other 3 great powers, being the Marines, Luffy is the only pirate in history to have conducted an assault on all 3 of their major locations. And when I say assault, I don't mean a mineral composed primarily of sodium chloride sitting on your butt. That would be our salt. I mean, Luffy straight up invaded each of these locations. When he was still but a wee rookie, Luffy became responsible for the destruction of any slobby. Then shortly after, this naughty streak continued as he conducted the world's only recorded mass breakout of Impel Down. And then of course, to complete the Triforce of being a complete and utter pain in the dick, he went on to participate in the Paramount War at Marineford, bringing his own personal army with him, which in retrospect consisted of 2 former warlords, 1 future warlord, and 1 still very current big head. No Emperor of the Sea has caused the world government more direct trouble than Luffy has. Also, remember that time he punched a world noble and got away with it? Or remember that time he punched Garp and got away with it? Or that time that a fully transformed Sengoku punched Luffy and Luffy just went bloop bloop bloop, I'm a balloon now. Which apparently was enough to stop like the 2nd most powerful Marine to have ever lived. And after this event, we also received a new branch for Luffy's pedigree tree. After this point, he began training with Silvers Ray Lee, the Pirate King's right-hand man guy. And whilst the training itself was unknown to the world government, they did make a very public display of being together by returning to Marineford very specifically for a photo op. Something we've kind of skipped over though is the presence of Nico Robin. Robin is allegedly the only person in the world who can read the ancient language, and therefore the only person who can reveal the true history of the world, which the world government don't want known because they've done some very, very shifty things. A lot of homicides, genocides, regicides, infanticides. In fact, if the word has the suffix side in it, then these guys have probably done it. And furthermore, who knows what scandalous pictures of Im and the Gorosei lay hidden in the cloud storage of the Void Century. So it's just better to make sure that none of that is ever made public. But the one person who can do just that has pledged her loyalties to this here Monkey Man. I would find that quite worrying. In addition, Luffy is a documented user of Conqueror's Haki even before he knew what it was, but that still should have been cause for concern. And in the post-time skip era, he's having something of a passive impact on the world through the formation of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Luffy doesn't need to do anything here, these guys are just gathering and causing various problems in his name. So this is definitely the point where if I was some sort of government overlord, I would be saying that we need to send admirals plural, after Luffy. Because we're not even up to current events yet. What's to come is somehow set to eclipse everything Luffy's already done. After Wano sees the dishonorable discharge of Koido and Giga Granny, will the world government still be able to ignore the reality that Luffy is the most dangerous man on the planet? Probably because we need to keep our underdog theme going until right at the end. But at this point, he'll have 3 out of the 4 road poneglyphs, the only person in the world who can read them, and a rubber fist capable of fighting on par with the world's greatest of fists, be they Haki, Magma, or even non-existent in the case of Shanks, who is notably missing 1 fist, which puts him at a slight disadvantage. And I can imagine a situation where Shanks rather tragically dies in some sort of Blackbeard-related incident because Teach takes advantage of the fact that Shanks only has 1 arm, which may make Luffy feel just a little bit responsible and itching to punch that hairy hippo. Speaking of though, there are arguably only 2 people in the world who can be considered a threat equal to or greater than Luffy. One of which is the aforementioned Hippo and the other is Luffy's father. And I say it like that instead of calling him Dragon, because the fact is that one of the only other 2 greatest planetary dangers just so happened to squirt Luffy out of his Dratini is even more reason to fear Luffy himself. Because at least with Blackbeard, he and Luffy are natural enemies. But with Dragon, they're natural allies. At least in the eyes of the outsiders who just see parent and child. A very devious parent and a very punch-happy child. It's at the point where I would argue that Luffy really should have a bounty higher than that of even Roger. Because we're not messing around. This is no longer about fighting foxes with afros. No. This is about the One Piece. And Luffy's bounty is fairly predictable in that regard. It might not reach this immediately after Wano, even if maybe it should. But Roger, the man with the highest recorded bounty, sat at 5,564,800,000 berries. And Luffy only needs to go a bit higher than that and land at the number of 5.6 billion berries. Because 56 is his trademark number because it can be read as Gomu, and it would make Luffy officially the most wanted man in the world. And it would also make you well prepared for this next video, because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.